Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Gukas. I'm with CriticalArc, co-hosting today's event on behalf of TACUPA. We're real proud to be TACUPA sponsors and sponsors of local and higher education, law enforcement, and public safety. Today's event is going to be the first of a series of symposiums. We hope to have a couple of these in the next couple months based on COVID regulations and rules. But today we're going to be talking a little bit about Ferguson, Missouri. But before we get to that, I'd like to introduce Paul Willingham, who is the incoming and interim president of TACUPA. He's going to talk a little bit about some housekeeping and upcoming events and membership for TACUPA. So if you could bring Paul up, please.
Hello, everybody. Am I on the screen, Ryan? I am.
I believe you are.
Sorry to subject everyone to that view. Hello, my name is Paul Willingham. I'm the chief of police for Lone Star College System down in Harrison, Montgomery County. And I'm the vice president right now of TACUPA and will be the incoming president in 2021. I just want to welcome everybody to this event. It's been a challenge to figure out what to do to add value to our membership in this COVID era. And so one of the things that our partners, that our board and our partners there at CriticalArc had thought of is what a great, we can't travel a lot, so maybe we could do a Zoom thing. Some people can travel, but either way, the longer we're away, the harder it is. So we thought maybe some short symposiums, half day type of things to provide some insights. And so this is kind of a kickoff of that. We're planning several for 2021, including some in the spring. And so I invite you to stay tuned for that as we move forward with that. So while a lot of organizations offer conferences and there's also training out there, this is an opportunity that for us as higher ed practitioners to get together virtually and face to face, but at the same time, do some learning and stuff. And one of the neat things about this situation that we're going to talk about here is that you'll find in Mr. Watson's presentation that higher ed was very much a part of this situation, maybe not in the forefront of the news, but indeed, I know for a fact that there were meetings that were staged at the University of Missouri, St. Louis area for some of the discussions between the various factions. And I know that there are a lot of higher ed locations that were near Ferguson. But quite frankly, what happened there could happen in any of our locations, especially in today's day and age. So we thought this would be a great way to kick it off. We've got some other presentations, some other pretty neat options down the line too. So we urge you to stay tuned for that. I do want to let you know that we are in the middle of a TACUPA drive for membership, trying to renew those who were members in 2020 and try to get more members. So it really, word of mouth is important, and we urge more than one member per department. Anybody who'd like to join, I think would help our standing if we have a large number of people within our profession and our genre of policing to take part in as a member of TACUPA. It would certainly be advantageous in granting us a little more authority to speak for our type of policing. So if you are interested in becoming a TACUPA member, I'm going to give you a website, and then and I'll also give you my email. You can always email me. But the membership website for TACUPA is TACUPA, so tacupa.org, tacupa.org/become a member, all one word. So tacupa.org/become a member. Our institutional membership includes obviously a directory of all campus law enforcement professionals in the association, any future job listings, lobbying power for legislative issues in campus law enforcement, training opportunities, conferences and seminars, we have a TACUPA listserv, as well as $500 for those injured in the line of duty, and $1,000 for those killed in the line of duty. And that would be if someone in your organization is in that situation, and you're a member in good standing, then those options are there for you. So please visit that. And for professional membership, it's only $50 a year, and that's I think a very good price to pay for this type of organization. So I'm also going to give you my email address. I wish I could be there with you, but my organization has travel restrictions. I was not allowed to leave. So I'm doing the best I can to do this virtually. But I do want to give you my email address. And so if you have any questions about this presentation, about possible future presentations, about membership, about what TACUPA can do for you and your organization, I urge you to please email me. And if I can't give you the answers, I will find someone who can. And so my email address is pretty easy. It's my name, Paul, Paul, .Willingham, WILLINGHAM, Paul.Willingham at Lone Star, just like it sounds, .edu. Paul.Willingham at lonestar.edu. And I hope to hear from you. So it is my pleasure. Oh, look at that. They put it up on the chat already for those of us who are in the Zoom. So look at that. That's pretty fancy. Okay, so it is my pleasure. I had a chance to chat with our speaker a couple of weeks ago, and I found that he and I, despite being from different areas of the country, have a lot in common. One of those things that we have in common is we both have a love for the game of baseball, but not just baseball, but the history of the pastime. And as much as I can't stand the St. Louis Cardinals, no offense, Byron, that comes from a history of being an Astro fan. But as much as I can't stand the St. Louis Cardinals, I do respect the fact that they have some of the best baseball fans in the country. And I always enjoy seeing when something's going on with an opponent there in St. Louis, where the opponent is winning or doing something spectacular. It always impressed me how St. Louis fans could get behind their opponent and cheer when they see something of innate baseball uniqueness, like a no-hitter or a great play in the field or that sort of thing. So always impressed me with that. But besides his wonderful knowledge of baseball, and we could probably talk, we already decided we could have a beer and talk for days about our various baseball heroes, some of which we share. He has a unique experience and a great background in law enforcement, working in a major metropolitan area. St. Louis County is a police department that, in Texas, most of our counties they handle the jails, but there's a large hunk of St. Louis County that is unincorporated. And so patrol was a big hunk of that. But he also served some time working for the police department of St. Louis Community College. So he has that higher ed experience as well. And now in his retirement, he is a police chaplain and community liaison, as well as serving our country honorably in Vietnam. So I think who we have here is arguably a true American hero. But he had some unique experiences in 2015 with the Ferguson situation from the inside. So this is probably, we're going to probably hear stuff that we never heard about because it didn't get on the news, CNN, or anything like that. So this is going to be a unique opportunity to talk to someone who's there on the inside. So this is I'm going to read you his formal. I just want to give you my informal intro, but his formal intro is: Byron Sarge Watson has over 40 combined years of service as a county and campus law enforcement officer, including 20 of supervisory experience and 5 as a police chaplain and community liaison. Byron began his law enforcement career in St. Louis County after serving in the Vietnam War and receiving an honorable discharge from the U.S. Army. At St. Louis County, Byron was promoted to the rank of sergeant and served in many capacities, including shift supervisor. I'm assuming, Byron, this is not official, but I'm assuming that you really liked being a sergeant, hence your nickname is Sarge. Yeah.
That's right. That's where it comes from.
Let me tell you, to this day, my favorite job was being a patrol sergeant. I wish I could go back to that. Maybe someday I will. Now, following a 28-year career with St. Louis County Police Department, he continued serving as a police officer at St. Louis Community College for another 8 years. In 2014, Byron returned to the St. Louis County Police Department during the civil unrest and protests in Ferguson, Missouri, as a primary liaison to the St. Louis County Chief of Police, community leaders, and the media. He served in this role both during and after the events in Ferguson until he was appointed by then Governor Jay Nixon to the Ferguson Commission. Byron served as Ferguson Commissioner for 4 years to help the region and community and police relations heal. So today, Byron continues to serve as an ordained police chaplain, an elder at Faith Miracle Temple, head of the St. Louis Homicide Ministry and Community Alliance, and a board member for BackStoppers Inc., as well as an international media ambassador for Moolah Shriners. So I am very happy to share with you Brian Sarge Watson's for the next hour and a half. I think what he has to prepare for, is going to be awesome. So I hand the floor over to you, sir, and I will be watching and listening intently. Thank you for being here. And
Thank you,
everyone,
Paul.
give him a round of applause at home and there. If you're there, you're one of 10 people, so you need to make it loud.
Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate that warm introduction and welcome. I really feel very welcome here in the state of Texas. I got here yesterday, and Ryan and Jason, they've taken me around. I've done some sightseeing, and we got a chance to eat at some of your fine restaurants, and definitely we went over to the Flying Saucers, and I found a little bit about how many beers you guys can drink, and you can get your plaque up on the wall. I think that's pretty neat, but it's really been really nice since I've been here. A little cooler than what I expected. I did not bring a coat, so I've been pretty cool here the last few days. But I just want to say thank you to not only TACUPA, to Jason, to Ryan, and also to Paul for having the confidence and faith in me to bring me down here from St. Louis to be a part of this symposium and for this presentation. So what I'm going to impart with you here is some of the things that we learned, some of the lessons that we learned. One of the things that we found that there was no book on what we experienced. I don't believe there was a police department around that had ever experienced anything of this magnitude, this depth, and this much destruction of property. And so we basically wrote the book in St. Louis. So if you guys want to come and see the book, we've got the book now. So there was really no book on this. And so hopefully I'm going to impart some things that we learned during the lessons of Ferguson. And there are a lot of people that will say that, well, that can't happen here. Well, this photograph here, I really like showing this photograph for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons I like showing this is Ferguson. I think this could be anywhere in America right now. Every place has a bedroom community similar to something like this with a lot of downtown entertainment. Let's see, where's my map at? Should be right behind that. But anyway, the Ferguson is about 6.1 square miles. So it's not a very, on television, it made it look like it was half of St. Louis. However, their population's about 21,000 people, about 6.1 square miles. Probably the houses in that area, they run about $81,600. So it's not really an impoverished area like it was shown on television. That was just one section of Ferguson. Ferguson has some homes that in some other areas would run as high as $1 million. The median income in Ferguson is about $42,000 a household. So I think we could probably replicate this city probably anywhere in America. When I was told that, when someone would tell me that this would take place in Ferguson, we have about 90 municipalities in St. Louis County. And of those 90 municipalities, if someone was going to tell me where would our problem be? Where would we have the fuse lit? Because there are powder kegs in all of our cities. And we all pretty much know the areas that we are more inclined to think that that's where our problem is going to come from. We did not have any idea that it would be probably one of the smallest counties in St. Louis County that would become the epic center for what was to become the riot of the century. On a Saturday, and I remember this day so well because I was at a picnic that was about 1.5 miles from where this happened. And as we were leaving the picnic, I happened to look at my watch. It was 12 noon. So at 12 noon, Saturday, August the 9th, 2014, I was driving down West Florissant and there was a police car blocking, keeping me from going any further. I had no idea at the time what was going on. However, I later found out that Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson, that name became very over a period of time because he was on television and a lot of you saw his picture. Officer Wilson was like most of us as police officers. We patrol around in our vehicles, we make traffic stops, we make pedestrian stops, and we go about answering radio calls. Well, on this particular day, Officer Wilson was on a street called Canfield, which runs right off of West Florissant. And as he was driving down Canfield, which is some apartments that are called the Canfield Apartments, low income, very, I'd say probably 96, 97% minority population there. There were 2 black males that were walking in the middle of the street. A lot of people didn't hear that story because some people said, what started all of this? A simple pedestrian stop that I think as police officers, many of us have made many times. But I don't think we ended up with what Darren Wilson ended up with that particular day. Upon stopping Darian Johnson and Mike, he told them to get out of the street. Now, no one was there but these 3 individuals. So we don't know the tone. We don't know how Officer Wilson may have told them to get out of the street. However, there was some harsh words said between the officer and Mike Brown and Darian Johnson. A verbal altercation, you may say, to the point where Officer Wilson pulled his car, blocking them from walking any further. And at that time, Mike Brown approached the car and a physical assault occurred inside the car, at which time Darren Wilson discharged 2 rounds from his firearm, striking Mike Brown in his hand. At that time, Mike Brown took off, began running. So did Darian Johnson. Darren Wilson got out of his vehicle and began to pursue the suspects. At some point, Mike Brown stops, turns around, and from the officer's account, began to charge his location. The officer at that time stated that he fired 12 rounds from his duty weapon, 6 of them striking Mike Brown. The last round was a fatal round that hit him right in the top of the head as he was falling. Mike Brown died right there on the scene. And what would happen after that is something that St. Louis will never forget. There were a lot of components that were going on with Mike Brown that didn't really get talked about in the news media or didn't get talked about by people that were outside of St. Louis. But on the inside of St. Louis, we knew that the city of Ferguson was like somewhat of a ticking bomb. Relationships between the police departments hadn't always been rosy. Trust, capital in the community was not always there. So when this event occurred, it was bad enough on itself that we ended up with the subsequent riots, but there was some tension that started before this. Mike Brown, when he was shot and killed, laid in the street for 4 hours. Now, for most of us in the room, we understand that there are a lot of reasons why that could happen. Well, social media didn't do us no favors, and I'll be talking about this a little later, of controlling your narrative. As a police department, we have a tendency to react too slow to major events. We want to get all of our ducks in order. We want to try to do all the investigation we can. We don't want to provide the community with any information until we're sure that what we're putting out is accurate in the way it happened. And we, as police officers, we understand that. But as a community, they want answers. And whatever you can give them at that time that doesn't jeopardize the case or doesn't cause any problems, you should try and do that. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in this slide. But anyway, the reason why Mike Brown laid out there for 4 hours and was bleeding from his head, there were some people with their cameras, they took pictures of that before we could actually get a tarp over the top of him. He laid in the street. And the reason he laid in the street is that when the officers tried to approach Mike Brown, they received sniper fire from an apartment up above. And at that point, the commander pulled them out and told them to wait until we can get our SWAT team down there to deal with that sniper, because we didn't know where he was. The shots were ringing out from different locations. That's something a lot of people didn't hear about. Another thing they didn't hear about is that the medical examiner has a protocol that once shots are being fired, they can no longer enter that scene until it's secure. Just like an ambulance or just like a fire department, they cannot enter into that area until it's deemed safe. So that was another reason Mike Brown laid out there. Our homicide division was out of St. Louis area. They were a long way away, and it took them an extremely long time to get there. Now, the narrative that I just told you, how soon do you think that narrative came out? Do you think that narrative would have maybe came out that day? No, it didn't. The narrative that came out that particular day was that Mike Brown had his hands up and he was surrendering to Darren Wilson at the time he was killed. This went on social media and it was soon viral. This narrative, to this day, I could take you over on Canfield and you can talk with any of the residents in that area. And even to this day, there are people that truly in their heart believe that Mike Brown's hands were up. And this officer shot him and killed him in cold blood. This is why I'm saying the importance of being able to control the narrative. With social media, things can get from St. Louis to California in just a click of a button. And this became the narrative that we had to fight. And by the time we came out with our narrative as to why it took so long to get Mike Brown from the middle of the street, by the time we were able to sort of put our spin on it, this had already taken the headlines. The news had already started publicizing this, and it got ingrained in people's minds, and they never forgot it. So I'm going to talk a little more about that a little bit later on. But another thing about this particular location was that the mother, Mike Brown's mother, father, his friends, if you've ever been at the scene of something like this, there are people that will try to take advantage of people's sorrow. And there were some agitators that were really talking about this hands up, don't shoot. And the people that were coming to the scene to see what was going on, they were hearing this. And they were very angry to think that this police officer had killed Mike Brown in cold blood. Once again, that was the narrative. The first wave, there were several different ways that we dealt with in this protest. The first wave started on the night that Mike Brown was killed. During the day, you had a lot of rumblings, and it was a lot of people congregating around, but no violence, just peaceful protesting. However, when the nightfall came, things started to change. And we started to notice some sort of a way of it continually happening the same way it happened. Days were very peaceful, nights were very volatile. But in this particular wave, on August the 9th, the Quick Trip that was located on West Florissant went up in flames. The Ferguson Police Department, which is a police department of about 53 sworn officers, attempted to try initially to handle this outbreak, this protest. But it quickly became more than they were able to handle. And at that time, it was handed over to the St. Louis County Police Department that I used to work for before I retired. We have a department of about 900 sworn officers. So we took over span of control, and we began putting our officers in to sort of work with the Ferguson Police Department. The first few nights were a little tenuous. We had our tactical SWAT team that was out there dressed in their camouflage and militarized vehicles. We had our canines that were out there. We were firing rubber bullets, tear gas, and something that started out as just being law enforcement started to become political, because Jay Nixon started getting calls about the militarization of this protest. There were people calling it a peaceful protest, which it was during the daytime. But at the nighttime, there were two sets of people. There weren't the same people at night that there was during the day. The people that were protesting during the day, when they would see it get nightfall, they would leave, and there would be a group that would come in that was mainly people that were professional protesters. I didn't know that people actually had a job to protest, and they get paid for doing it. And a lot of these individuals came in at night, and this is where we were having a lot of our problems. And there were a lot of complaints about the militarization. The county came in pretty heavy-handed. We had one incident, and this made the front page of our newspaper, of one of our SWAT team guys were on the top of one of their trucks with a sniper rifle. And he was pointing it into the crowd of people that were protesting. Now you can imagine what that looked like. Here we have just shot and killed an individual, and now you've got a SWAT officer on the top of a SWAT vehicle with a sniper rifle pointing at other protesters. So Jay Nixon had enough of this, and he just said, at this point, this is getting to be more, the police are causing more of a problem than we're solving right here. So he brought in the state police to take control. So if you can imagine, now this thing is now been handed over 3 times now, or 2 times, from Ferguson to St. Louis County, and now it's being handed over to the state. And the county obviously didn't take too well to that, because they felt like this was theirs, it was given to them, became a very political football. But subsequently, the governor won, and they came in and took the span of control, took away the military vehicles, took away the camouflage. They became a little bit more just their regular duty uniforms, trying to, turn down the temperature a little bit. And in the initial beginning of this, it did just that. So on August the 25th, Jay Nixon assigned the State Patrol to handle the disturbance that was going on. Probably, I would say somewhere by the end of September, things started to quiet down a little bit. We weren't having as many. We were still having some, gatherings, but nothing as severe as what we had seen the first week or so after Mike Brown was killed. And then we had our second wave. And this is by far was the worst of the worst. Matter of fact, that one video or one picture that we had came from that second wave. And this was when Bob McCullough, who was our prosecuting attorney at the time, he had called in a grand jury to take a look at this case. And on November the 24th, they rendered a decision to not indict Darren Wilson for the shooting of Mike Brown. And that evening, when it became nightfall, we saw something that we as police officers had never seen in our lives. Many of our officers, including myself, we've been around combat. We've got officers that have been in Iraq, officers that have been in Afghanistan. What we saw that night made us shake in our boots. I have never heard or seen that much gunfire, that much violence, that much hatred, that much destruction in my life. And I thought I had seen it all. Here we were in a bedroom community, Ferguson, Missouri, 21,000 people, 6.1 square miles, probably the last place anyone would have ever thought something of this magnitude could take place. That riot continued at that intensity all the way up to December the 2nd. So if you can imagine that type of violence night in and night out. During the day, it was peaceful. In the evenings, it was like Armageddon. It was like night and day. We could see a distinct difference between the two. And so often we have a lot of our police departments and our city managers and city hall are constantly always talking about budgets. We don't have enough money for community outreach. We don't have enough money to be able to have citizen programs. Unfortunately, when you don't have enough money for those types of programs, when things go bad, you have no trust and you have no capital in the area where this went off. So now they had to find money. As I said earlier, a lot of these municipalities are like most police departments, don't have a lot of money. But somewhere they ended up having to find money that they hadn't allocated or they had not even budgeted. $22,600,000 was spread amongst those police departments. Over 3,000 man hours around the clock. Took us 1,200 officers, and that's not even counting the National Guard. Was another 2,200 National Guard people that were sent out as well. Their figures are not up on that slide. So this gives you just how much money your department is going to possibly be out of just for manpower. We haven't even gotten into the rest of it yet. But just the manpower alone is going to cost you that much. As I said earlier, there were 17 businesses that were totally destroyed. And as you know, businesses is where cities get their revenue. They get their sales tax, their revenue tax, their business tax. Everything comes from those businesses that you have in your community. When they get burned down, when they get destroyed, many of these people decide not to rebuild or not to stay where they're at. In this case, we lost 40 to 60% of those businesses. They never came back, either through just bankruptcy, not enough insurance, or some just giving up and not wanting to go back and rebuild. A total of 37 businesses were vandalized, looted. There was a lot of looting going on, a lot of vandalism going on. Just the damage to the buildings in the city of Ferguson alone, $4.6 million worth of damage. And on top of that, now you start talking about the impact that this had on the city itself. Now, before I, looks like that's a little different, but before I talked about the budget in Ferguson being about 25 million for a small municipality. That's about right. And a lot of times when you say you don't have the money to put into programs like citizens ride-alongs or community engagement, they ended up paying out $1.5 million to settle a wrongful death claim by the family. The insurance paid out for the courts about $1.7 million. Oh, that was supposed to be slipped. Let's see, I'm gonna go here and then I'll go back. Somewhere around about, I'd say November, toward the end of November, Governor Nixon came up with a thought that we really needed to have an independent body to investigate and not only look at the city of Ferguson, but to look at the region as a whole, to find out why did this happen? How did this happen? And most importantly, how can we prevent this from happening again? And they called this committee the Ferguson Commission. And I was appointed by Governor Nixon to be on that commission. And it was a total of 16 of us. We were all community leaders, people that were well thought of in the community, people that had the trust of the community. They were from all different walks of the community, a very diverse committee. And they broke us down into 6 separate groups that we were going to investigate. Some were investigating poverty in St. Louis. Some of them were investigating the school system. I happened to be appointed to the municipal courts and the police department, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I wanted to read this here, what Governor Nixon said. And believe it or not, he almost became a prophet, because this is exactly what the Ferguson Commission ended up doing. Their most important work will be the charge we see in our institutions and our workplaces and our interactions with one another. Change of this magnitude is hard, but maintaining the status quo is simply not acceptable. And I think that that's where we're going to have to get in police work. That the way we have been doing business, and some of us have been doing things the same way for a long time because we haven't had to change. Most for police departments, they change when they have to. They don't look proactively and try to look ahead and try to ward off future problems. They wait till those future problems become problems in the present, and then they try to adjust. The problem is we can't adjust fast enough for the world that we're living in now. So more important now than ever is we have to be more forward thinking, more forward looking, to make sure that we're always trying to find ways of not staying with things just because that's just the way we've always done them. I know some of us have worked for people like that. You know, why do we keep doing things like this? Well, we do it because we've always done it this way. Oops, I think I'm losing a slide there. Oh, there we go. So there were actually 3 investigative bodies or 3 investigative parties that were involved with investigating the Ferguson incident. We had the Ferguson Commission, which I was on, that was through Governor Jay Nixon. We had the United States Department of Justice, and we also had the Missouri State Justice. And we all had our own independent investigation of the Ferguson incident. What we found in this investigation, what we found was a fact that we all came up with similar findings. And the fact that I worked on the municipal and the police and the court system, a lot of these findings had a lot to do with the police department and how they went about doing their business. One of the things we have in St. Louis, and I don't know about here in other places, and I'm sure they're probably the same, we have a total of 90 municipalities in St. Louis County. Some of these departments are as small as 2 officers and a police chief and a mayor. They are not able to provide the services for that community. And when anything happens that is of a large scale, they call in the county police to come in and handle large situations. So we have a lot of police departments that are basically funded through citations and summonses. It's basically one of the things we found is that a lot of these departments, if you took that revenue away, they would no longer exist as a police department. Some of them had a budget of over 50% of their budget was from traffic tickets and from fines, court fines. In 2010 through 2014, when we looked into Ferguson, what we found is that during that time period, the city of Ferguson issued 90,000 citations. Once again, we're talking about an area of about 21,000 people with an area of about 6.1 miles. During that same time period, 85% of the people that were stopped and 90% of those that received citations were of minority ethnicity. Now, we said 67% of Ferguson was minority or Black. However, 90% of the tickets were being written to minorities. So what that told us as a committee is that there were a lot of people driving through Ferguson that was also being ticketed, because you can't have a number higher than the population unless it's people from outside of your population that are driving through. We found that Black drivers were twice as likely as whites to be stopped and to be searched. This is that pot that I was talking about that kept boiling over the years. The stops, the tickets, the revenue. And if you continually do that, people were getting to the point where they were starting to not like the police department. 23% of Ferguson's budget went towards 20% of their budget was from fines, from tickets, from fines. We looked at the municipal court, and one of the things that we found in the municipal court was that we found that we could have a prosecutor, a defense attorney, and a judge being one person. This person could be a judge in Ferguson, a prosecutor in Florissant, and a defense attorney in Beverly Hills. Now, I just use those as examples, but it was showing you the magnitude of the conflict of interest. How could you possibly hold all three of those hats and be able to be not only partial, neutral, but to be fair? But we had this going on, not only in the city of Ferguson, but this was going on throughout our municipal courts. And the fines and the fees that were being waged against people of color was lopsided when it came to sentencing, tickets, fines, and court costs. One of the things that we find as police departments, that if we don't do the things that we are supposed to be doing for our community, you don't want the federal government coming in and doing it for you. And the federal government, the Department of Justice, when they come into these types of situations, what they're looking for is civil rights violations. They were investigating Mike Brown's death as a civil rights violation, that his constitutional rights had been violated. Anytime you get the Department of Justice coming in, they are going to look through your files and look through your police department like a tax auditor. I mean, they're looking for anything that will build their case that this person's civil rights were violated. They were unable to find anything in their investigation. Neither was the state of Missouri's Department of Justice, and neither was the Ferguson Commission able to find anything that pointed to the fact that there was any wrongdoing in the death of Mike Brown. However, in looking into their court practices, looking into their police practices, and looking into some of the other things going on in the police department, many of these things that probably should have already been instituted were not in place. So the Department of Justice issued what we call a consent decree. And a consent decree is not that you may do it, it says you shall do it. You don't have a choice. And you're going to pay us for doing it. So instead of you doing this on your own, now when the federal government gets involved, you no longer have control over it. You're going to do it. You have an option. You don't have to do it, but you don't have to be a police department either. The feds will shut you down. They will take away your ability to be a police department. If you cannot abide by the decree that they put on you, the mandates they put on you. So a lot of the things that you're going to see up here that they ended up putting on the city of Ferguson are things that they probably could have been doing already. This is why I'm saying forward thinking about those things that would probably keep you from getting into a situation like this would maybe not cost you $10 million. But that's what the Department of Justice charged the city of Ferguson, to put a consent decree up on them. Some of the things that they ended up saying that they had to do was a civilian review board to oversee the courts and the police. Now, a lot of police departments are a little leery about letting citizens in on citizens review board. They're quick to say, well, we have a police board. We have police commissioners, and these police commissioners are civilians, and so therefore we don't need any more civilians. Well, you know, that's an argument that we can have. But at the same time, I think it's coming to a point, and this is one of those status quo things, that the public is wanting to know more about how their police departments operate. It's very important that we be transparent with our community that we serve, that we not hide things from them. And anytime that this topic comes up, police departments are so quick to try to dispel it or get rid of it that people have a tendency to wonder, what is it that they're hiding? Why don't they want us to be on the board? What could they possibly be doing behind closed doors that we can't see? And this is coming from community leaders. These are coming from people who, I think if we partnered with these individuals and brought them in, and if, people that have nothing to hide nothing, and show them some of the things and the decisions that we make and why we make them, these individuals can turn in to be our advocates instead of leaders of the protest or the riot that comes after that. So we can either make these individuals our friends, or we can end up continually making them our enemies. But instead, the DOJ mandated that they now have a civilian review board, and they're in the process of doing that. They have 5 years to get all of this done. Now, if we'd have had body cam, now this was something that came toward the end of my career, and there were a lot of officers very reluctant to wear body cameras, thinking that Big Brother was going to be spying on them, that they were going to end up getting in more trouble. My little time with body cameras, I found that more officers were exonerated than were ever convicted or found to be doing wrong. Our officers, for the most part, were doing what they were supposed to do. These body cameras, I felt, had we had a body camera on Darren Wilson, we have so much that we did not see, that we had to take the word of another person and witnesses that were at the scene. But a body camera would have probably solved the hands up. It probably would have solved whether or not Mike Brown charged towards Officer Wilson. Those are the things that not having a body camera made it very difficult. And that narrative that his hands were up, we could not disprove that. We had witnesses that said it wasn't that way, but had we had body cameras, it would have been no question about whether his hands were up, whether they're not, whether he was charging or was it he not. Now, all of the officers in the city of Ferguson now have body camera. Once again, the dealing with the small groups. I can't talk enough about the importance of dealing with your community leaders, dealing with clergy. Clergy is your best friend. One of the things that came out of this is a very closer relationship with our area pastors and ministers and priests. The people that go to their churches are the people that live in your town. Many of these pastors and these preachers, they know these individuals probably better than most. And when you have problems in your community, these are some individuals you need to start leaning on more. A lot of departments think that they cause more problems than they solve, but a lot of times when they see their pastor standing with the police, or they see their minister or their priest standing with the police, you can resolve a lot of tension and a lot of problems if they've got someone there that they know they can trust. So that's very important. Now, this particular bill here was one that I was a part of, and I think this is something that I can actually say made a difference in the city of St. Louis and also in the state of Missouri. Senate Bill number 5. So often in law enforcement, there are things that we want to change. And as a police officer, one of the things I had always said is that we have to find a way to get the incentive out of writing tickets, especially for those smaller munis that depended solely on revenue to fund their departments. Senate Bill number 5, I had one individual one night, he came up to me, I'll tell this real short story if you don't mind. And he came to me and he says, Commissioner, I need to tell you a story about what happened to me. I said, well, what happened? He says, well, I was out playing basketball one day and I got real sweaty. And then when I got back to my car, I took my shirt off and I was sitting in my car, I had my air conditioning on, and all of a sudden I saw a police car pull behind me. And I hadn't even started the car. I mean, I had started the car, but I hadn't put it in drive. I wasn't even driving. So I thought, well, he'd leave in a few minutes, but he stayed there and then eventually he got out of the car. And he came over to my door and he says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, I just got through playing basketball and I'm sweating and I took my shirt off and I'm just cooling out. I'm getting ready to leave." He says, "Can I see your driver's license?" He says, "Well, I'm not even driving. Why do you need to see my driving license?" Once again, there came some verbal argument over just giving driver's license. And eventually the officer told him that he was under arrest for indecent exposure. Now, this individual had a very big job. He made pretty good money. Getting arrested for a sexual offense, this individual tells me that he was subsequently fired from his job. He ended up getting a divorce from his wife. He got kicked out of his house. Guess what happened to the complaint? It was unfounded. When we start talking about the Black community and how they view us as a police department, we have one view of what we do. But unfortunately, for so many people of color, they don't see the police department the same way that we see them. And one thing that I learned from being on the Ferguson Commission and hearing these types of stories over and over and over, our committee said that we have to do something to change this. I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to change this. So we got a hold of some legislators in the state capitol. We sat down with them and we started talking about ways that we could bring this thing under some sort of control. One of the things that we found out is that by state law, you were required to keep 30% of your revenue, a max of 30%. But there were some municipalities that we found that were taking up to 80% of the revenue from tickets, and they were funding their police department through it. But we had no law with no teeth in it. Senate Bill number 5 now says you can only keep 20% of that. The other 80% goes to Department of Revenue. Your books are audited at the end of each year, and you have to show that that's what you've been doing. We also looked at the fines. We had fines that were irregular. There was no consistency in fines. I could get a ticket in the city of Ferguson and I could get a ticket out in Maplewood, and we both could be speeding the same, but yet our fines were very much different. Senate Bill number 5 put a cap on fines. Fines now can be no more than $300. And we now require the judge, which the judge always had this authority, but most of them weren't doing it. Anytime you have a person in your court, you have an option of either putting them on a payment plan so that they can still work and not have to go to jail, and they can pay their fines off on a monthly basis or however else you guys work it out, or they can do community service. Some people just cannot afford to pay the ticket. They had no other alternative until Senate Bill number 5. Now they have 3 options. And it's not any longer the discretion of the judge. He must offer all 3 of those options to everyone in his court. Okay, now we're going to get into the lessons learned, and there were many lessons learned, and I want to spend a little time on this area because this is what we found out, and hopefully this will help other departments out there from doing some of the things that we found the hard way. building community relations in capital now. If you're not interacting with your community through citizens academies, we now have citizen police academies where individuals come to a makeshift academy where we put on things that we do on our department. We give them ride-alongs. We even take them down to our police academy. They get a chance to use what we call our FATS machine, where it's the scenarios of shoot and don't shoot. We put our citizens sort of in our shoes, explorer programs, things to try to get the police and the community to try to start being on one accord. And the citizens love it. They absolutely love it. They're doing this now in the city of Ferguson. But this is something, as I said earlier, we should already be doing. We shouldn't have to have the Department of Justice come down from Washington, D.C. and make us do it. If you don't have these types of programs in your department now, it's a good time to start thinking about putting them in. One of the other things that you need to take a look at in your department, does your department reflect the community that you serve? This doesn't seem to be a big problem until you have a problem. In the city of Ferguson, as I said earlier, 67% of the population was African American or Black. On a department of manpower of 53 officers, 53 sworn officers, there were 3 Black officers on this department. If you go throughout many of our police departments throughout America, I'm sure right here in Texas, unfortunately, we see that repeating itself too many times. And if we are going to get people of color to trust us, your police department is going to have to start looking a little bit about the community that you serve. You cannot have an all-white police department patrolling a 67% minority and people of color area. It's not that they can't do the job. It's a matter of perception, of inclusiveness, being able to include the people in your community so that when a young Black man or a young Black boy looks at a police officer, that officer looks like him. That's how you build capital. That's how you start to build trust in your community. This was a big one, as I said earlier. With social media right now, with people with cell phones, with cameras, just about every scene that you're on, you should think that you're being filmed. If you're not being filmed, you should react and act like you are, because more than likely, you probably are being filmed. And when the narrative got out that Mike Brown's hands were up, that he laid out there on the sidewalk for 4 hours, that this individual was shot while he was surrendering. The combination of all of this false information that was being put out there, by the time we got our narrative together and started trying to explain the things that they were upset about, nobody wanted to hear that now. You should have come out with that in the beginning. We actually heard individuals tell us that. You're changing the narrative now. That's not what happened. So what I'm saying for police departments now is to have someone in your department that is over social media. Social media now in our department, we now have a social media department to try to control the narrative on big scenes like what we had. When something like that happens now, we try to release body cam, we try to release any information that may help shape the narrative prior to the false narratives being put out there. And it's working really good. It's something that I think departments need to think about. I mean, it doesn't cost a lot to have someone assigned to, that could be your community relations officer. In addition to being a community relations officer, he can also be the person for social media, so that when you have an incident like this, he can go on social media, see what's being said out there, and try to have a counter narrative to it in live time, in real time, rather than after the narrative is already baked in, to have the narrative come behind that. As I said earlier, I could take you up there on Canfield now, and there are still people to this day that believe Mike Brown's hands were up. This was something, and I'll hit on this a little bit because I think this goes into when you're on large scenes like this particular one, you've got 1,200 officers that are assigned to the riot patrol. Being able to keep track of your officers is paramount. What we found in our department when we were doing this is that people were self-deploying. You know, police officers, we always try to be helpful. You know, we want to help. And when we see something going on, a lot of times we just respond. The problem with that is when you're dealing with something of this large a scale and you've got this many officers deployed, we had a command center where everybody had to check in and they also had to check out. But what we found is that we had some officers that were self-deploying themselves into the middle of this riot that we didn't know were there, and we didn't know if they left. So you can see the seriousness that happens when you don't have accountability for everyone that you've put out there in harm's way. Use of force. This is something that is in debate. A lot of departments are having debates about this. The use of rubber bullets, the use of tear gas. There are times when these things are needed. But in our case, the way that it was viewed by the public is that we were the aggressors. And the reason that they kept doing what they did is because we kept doing what we were doing. Now, I don't totally agree with all of that, but if that was the perception, if that's what they were thinking, and that's why this thing continued on all the way to December the 2nd, sometimes we may have to rethink our tactics. The look of a police dog biting a minority person of color in 2020 is not a good look. It might be efficient, it might work, but how does it look? What does it look like to the community? So once again, taking a look at our tactics and what we are using is very important. Be accountable and transparent. I think this goes without saying. Our citizens deserve the truth, even if it's going to make us look bad. They will forgive us for telling them the mistake that we made. They will not forgive us for covering up. So no matter how bad something may seem and you think that it's going to cause your department shame and maybe even cause you a lawsuit, the capital that you build with your community when you are accountable and transparent, even when you have done something wrong, what you will find is people are quicker to forgive you. But when you cover something up and then it later gets discovered, and now you have to admit that you've done something wrong, and not because it was the right thing to do, but because you got caught. Now the community loses even more trust in you and believe, what else are they hiding from me? Okay. Once again, knowing where your officers are located in real time. This is really becoming a big thing in law enforcement. knowing, we've got the flare on our police cars where communications can keep track of where the cars are at and where the officers are at. But when you get on scenes like this with riots and disturbances and protests, you need to have a tracking system to be able to keep track of where your officers are at in real time. When you had all of that shooting that was going on that night, all that violence that was going on, we had police officers taking cover. We didn't know if they were hit. We didn't know if they were safe. We didn't know where they were at. We knew where they should have been. But we need real-time tracking to be able to, if an officer doesn't respond to his radio, we know exactly where he's at. Monitor and maintain officers' resilience. Recognize exploitative protesters. Now, what we found in Ferguson was that a lot of the people that we ended up arresting did not live in the city of Ferguson. Matter of fact, they didn't even live in the state of Missouri. A lot of these individuals lived out of state. And one of the things that we are finding out through our intelligence and through our investigative techniques is that you have three types of protesters. You have the peaceful protester, the person that is out there that is just trying to get their voice heard. The second group, you got far left and far right groups that will take advantage of an opportunity to further their cause by causing violence, destruction. You also, in this category, also have paid protesters, people that are actually paid money to come and disrupt your city. And the third ones is what we call opportunists. Now, this individual would probably not run into a store and take out a computer if it hadn't been a riot. This person may not even been the type of person that would steal something that didn't belong to them. But when they had an opportunity to get away with something for nothing, they took advantage of that situation. And so that's where a lot of our vandalism and a lot of our looting came from, was individuals who took advantage of a situation. So in any type of protest that you're dealing with, try to look into the crowd and try and separate those individuals, because identifying the people in your crowd will quickly give you an idea of what you're dealing with. The protests that we dealt with during the day and the protests that we dealt with at night were two separate. We had people with children during the day. There were no children out there at night. The parents took their kids home because they knew what was going to happen. It was a whole new group of people out there, and these individuals were hell-bent on their agendas, whether they be far right, far left. The ones that were paid protesters were there just to raise as much hell as they could. And then you had the opportunists that was going to come in and clean up after everything was done. Well, let's look at Ferguson today. As I said earlier in the beginning, Ferguson was a police department of about 53 sworn officers, 3 of them being minorities. There was 1 city council that was on the council that was of color. They've had a transformation, I guess, to say the least. They elected their first Black mayor in the history of the city of Ferguson, Miss Ella Jones. I think if you would have said that probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, that the city of Ferguson would have a Black mayor, I don't think many people would have took a bet on that. They are on their 3rd police chief because of all the problems that were going on during the riot. We had one poor chief come from Miami, and he decided he was going to see if he could bring this situation under control. And He was out there one night and they were firing shots, and shots were going over his head as he was doing an interview. And I think he said, you know, I think Miami looks real good right now. And he left and went right back to Miami. We had a second chief, also black, came, once again, doing an interview on television, hearing the gunfire. And I'm telling you, I can't over-exaggerate this gunfire. I mean, I'm a seasoned veteran. It shook me. I'm telling you, I've never heard anything like that. He had never heard anything like that either. So we lost a second chief. So now we're on our third chief, and it looks like he may be staying for a while because things have kind of settled down in the city of Ferguson. So now we're working on our third black police chief, Chief Armstrong. I've had an opportunity to meet him. He's doing a good job. Frank McCall is the first black assistant police chief. So you think about this, the top 3 government officials are, you know, one's elected official, but the 3 top government officials now in this city of 67% minority is in charge of Ferguson. How do you think the people in that city now feels about their government? Do they feel like they may now have a voice? Do they feel like they may now be included? Do they feel now that maybe the next time there is an uprising in their city, that these individuals will have the capital and the trust built up to a level where we will not see a repeat of a Mike Brown again? It's hard to say, but I would think I would bet on that situation. 4 of the 6 county members are black compared to 1 in 2014. And this one here is probably the one that I want to spend a little time on. As a black police officer, I live a double life as an officer. I know what it's like to be a black man, and I know what it's like to be a black officer. And a lot of times when our officers are out on the front line of these protests, they receive the brunt of the anger, the frustration, the name calls. The names I heard our officers being called out there would make a sailor scream. What is so difficult for officers of color to deal with situations like this is that on one hand, the minority community demands that the police department reflect the city that they patrol. But then when they start to hire those officers on, they become the target of other people that look just like them, saying they're Uncle Toms, they're traitors. You can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. So now in the city of Ferguson, over half of their police department, I don't believe they're up to 53 anymore. I think they're more like about 49, 48 now. But over half of those officers are officers of color. It can be done. It should be done. And I'm here to say that the city of Ferguson here in 2020 compared to the city of Ferguson in 2014 has a bright future ahead. And I think we have now become the showcase for police departments all across America. That if we can do it, so can you. I want to thank you for inviting me to share that with you. I hope something of the things that I talked about will help you get a better understanding of how to build capital in your community, how to bring about trust in your community from the people that you serve, And I thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, that concludes the speaking portion of today's symposium. We're going to bring Paul back on just for a couple of last remarks before we close for the day. Myself and CriticalArc, thank you guys for all attending. And of course, we want to say thank you to Tarrant College for helping set all this up. And of course, TACUPA, thank you so much for allowing us to be a sponsor and supporting your mission. Paul, without further ado, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to also thank you and CriticalArc for helping us put this on and partnering with us, and really asking really nothing in return. I appreciate that. That shows a great deal of desire to support us. So thank you. Sarge, thank you so much. I know a lot of what you said is tough to hear sometimes. And, you know,
Yep.
I think we are at a precipice in our industry where we have an opportunity to make important and lasting changes that in some cases are way overdue. And, you know, we either lead or we get run over. And so I appreciate you providing us with your experience in that regard. I know everyone's hungry. They want to get out and get early release. I just wanted to say thank you again for attending. This is brought to you by TACUPA, the Texas Association of College and University Police Administrators. If you're interested in becoming a member, we welcome you. Please visit our membership website at tacupa.org, tacupa.org/become a member. If you have any questions about this presentation or any other or future presentations or about membership, I'm the 2021 president of TACUPA, and I'd love to talk to you. My email address is paul.willingham@lonestar.edu. Send me your name and phone number, and I'll give you a call and we'll chat. So with that, I know that I bid you all adieu. I wish you safety and happy holidays, and try to enjoy some downtime during this holiday season. Thank you very much, Ryan and Sarge, for your time.
Thank you.